I heard another story about the Tirunarayanapuram Eri, that the army of the Chola king constructed. Can you tell us that story?
Viranarayan Eri was built sometime around 935 to 940. It was
hearing from you that they were probably the first ones to introduce democracy, that they had a voting system. Can you tell us more about that?
See, when it comes to local administration, the elections were there even during Sangam period.
Can you tell us about the crimes and punishments also?
When the early punishments were more, can say, psychological, where a person.
So, talking about the army, you mentioned about how big Rajarajan's army was, as narrated in or as written in the Chalukya inscription. Now, this army was not just used to fight, if I understand it right, because I heard another story about the Tirunarayanapuram Eri, that the army of the Chola king constructed. Can you tell us that story? How did that Eri come about, the canals?
Okay. Viranarayan Eri was built sometime around 935 to 940. It was during the last years of Parantaka Chola. Parantaka had just completed an invasion of Sri Lanka, and while Parantaka was busy with his southern expeditions, the Rashtrakuta Emperor Krishna III decided to enter the Chola territory. So he was supported in this endeavor by the Ganga king, Bhutuga, and helped by the Ganga king. Actually, around 944, in fact, even before that, sometime around 933, 934, probably there was a talk of the Rashtrakuta army invading the Chola territory. But at that point in time, Rashtrakuta Emperor Krishna was busy with his northern expeditions into the Paramara territories. So, just to defend his northern territories from Rashtrakutas, Parantaka stationed a large army under his son Rajaditya, who was the crown prince, at a place called Nadunadu. Nadunadu actually is the modern day Kadalur and Vilpuram districts, which Nadunadu as you find out, is just the territory between the Chola territory and the Pallava territory. That's why it's called Nadunadu. It was right in the center of the Chola and Pandya territory. So, Chola and Pallava territory. So, he had stationed a large army in Nadunadu, and he was awaiting the invasion of Krishna. But unfortunately or fortunately, Krishna did not invade till 944. It was only 944 that Krishna invaded the Chola territory. And so they cannot keep the army idle. So there are about 1 lakh or so personnel. They're just sitting idle at Nadunadu. So Rajaditya decided to construct a lake. So he used his army and the army's free time to construct a lake, and that the lake was named after his father's title, Viranarayanan. So Parantaka Chola's title was Viranarayanan. So that name was given to the lake. So it became Viranarayanan Eri. Now it is called as Viranam Eri. So this Viranarayanan lake, the construction of this lake started sometime around 935 and was completed in about 5 years' time by 940, 941. And there were 72 or 73 sluices at that point in time. And even today, most of the sluices are still working. Yeah, they are still in good condition. And it was about 25 kilometers long and 15 kilometers wide when it was constructed. Now it is about 10 kilometers long and about 5 kilometers wide currently. And this lake was constructed in about 5 years' time by the Chola soldiers who were awaiting the invasion of the Rashtrakuta Emperor Krishna III. So in most cases, the Cholas used to do that, but it's not only Parantaka, but even after when Rajaraja came to power, the soldiers were involved in constructing the Rajarajeshwaram temple, what is now called the Brihadishwara temple, the Perudaya temple, the Tanjavur temple. So, in free time, the Chola army used to do a lot of work, a lot of this kind of manual work to help their kings in constructing lakes or temples and other buildings, you can see.
That is actually really brilliant to know, right? It's about, once again, it is a lesson for corporate people governance here. So how do we, utilize people's
Yeah,
time
exactly.
and efforts? So
Time
it's
and skills.
really nice. Yeah, that was the first thing that struck me when I heard that story for the first time. So let's talk a little about their administration. That we just saw how they were very good at utilizing the people. But can you tell us a little more about how good their administration was? I remember again, hearing from you that they were probably the first ones to introduce democracy, that they had a voting system, and they did a lot of other administrative reforms. Can you tell us more about that?
See, when it comes to local administration, uh, the elections were there even during Sangam period. There was a reference to elections in Sangam poetry. But what the Cholas did was they refined the process.
Okay.
So they introduced the Kodavole system, or where the nominations are put in a pot and then picked, was first introduced long back, even during the Pandya period. But over a period of time, the Cholas started defining those processes, and they put in place their own process. So the Kodavole system, the eligibility, the qualification criteria, and once elected, what that particular person is supposed to do. All these details were inscribed and properly documented. And you can see this document in the entire document in Uttarameru temple. In the Uttarameru temple, I think Parataka was the one who introduced these systems where elections were conducted to the local bodies. And Parantaka was the one who took the administration away from individuals and into the hands of boards. Earlier, warrior individuals called warrior used to take care of various administrative activities. For example, there will be a Eri warrior who used to take care of the tanks. Then there will be a Nila warrior who used to take care of the lands. Then Sunga warrior who used to take care of the taxes. And Tota warrior used to take care of the gardens and other stuff. But it was uh, Parantaka who took these activities from away from the individuals and formed the boards called Variyam. Even today in Tamil, you called Variyam, Insara Variyam, Tinir Variyam. This Variyam concept was brought or put in place by Parantaka sometime around 910 to 920 during that period. So he brought the collective responsibility into picture. It was not an individual's responsibility to take care of certain administrative activities. It is the collective responsibility of the people in that village. And how do you select people? Then he brought elections. Then that was called as Kodavole, where there will be a pot. You put the name, there will be candidates. You write the name of the candidates, you put it in the pot. The one getting the highest votes will be elected to the particular position. But the what you can say, the eligibility criteria was rather, you can say, a bit rigid or a bit primitive during Parantaka's period, because that was the time it just started. So it was more like you should own this much of land, you should have this much, you should have your own house, then you should you can say, you should have read this 2 Vedas or 3 Vedas, and all those stuff, because that was kind of some rigid, you can say, qualification criteria, which eligibility criteria, which Parantaka had in place. These processes were again refined by Rajaraja. Rajaraja actually introduced a lot of new eligibility criteria, wherein he said, okay, fine, any person standing for election should have this kind of. He should not have indulged in any of the 5 major crimes, what they call as Panjama Badagangal, which is killing a Brahmin, illicit relationship, using the using government property for private use, default of, you can say, taxation and all those stuff. So he said, a person contesting for election should not be convicted or should not be even accused of these Panchama Badhanas. Then he said, if a person wants to contest, then he should not have defaulted or delayed any tax payment to the government. So he brought in more qualification criteria compared to Parantaka. And prior to Parantaka, Parantaka was just introducing the law. So probably he had certain things in mind which he had put in place. And Rajaraja started refining this, and he came up with some real good, you can say, criteria. Once a person, the election was for 5 years. Once a person is elected to the post for 5 years, after his term was over, he cannot contest for another 5 years. He and his family members.
And he and his family members. So
he and his family members cannot contest for 5 years, and 10 years. There was a different benchmark for that. Where blood relationship should not contest for 10 years. You can say long distance relatives should not contest for 5 years and all those stuff. But minimum 5 years, they cannot. He or his family cannot contest elections again for that post or for any other post. So he was the one who refined the entire elections. I can say the administration, the way people were elected to these boards. And Rajarajan was the first, you can say, in my opinion, the first Tamil king, you can say, who actually introduced land reforms. He was actually called as Ulagalandha Soran because between 1001 and 1003, for 2 years, actually he measured every inch of land in Chola territory. Because before that, the taxes were not rational. There was no rational taxation system that was in place. And as I said, with a large army to support and with a large population, because more areas were added to the Chola administration, he wanted revenue. He wanted more income from every, I can say, every field. And agriculture was one, because agriculture was the most vibrant, I can say, profession or industry at that point in time. So he measured every inch of land for about 2 years. He categorized every land. He prepared a complete database. That's the one good thing he did. And the lands were actually divided into various categories. Irregular lands, or the lands given to the temples, Brahmadeyam or temple land given to the Brahmins, and then you have land given to the ministers, agricultural land, Pormok land, then even agricultural land, whether it was a lake cultivation or a canal cultivation. He actually prepared an exhaustive database, extensive database of the various land, we can say the land that was there in the Chola kingdom, and the taxes were imposed on these lands. It was actually the irregular lands, or the lands of the temples. They do not have any taxation. The Brahmins need not pay taxes for 4 years, then they have to pay taxes. Whereas for the other category of lands, it was 1/6. 1/6 of your proceeds. If you have 10 acres of land, then 1.6 acres, whatever is grown on 1.6 acres, should be given to the government as tax. So that was an additional source of revenue he generated from the tax. So that there was no rational taxation that was in place. So he was the one who actually divided the lands, categorized the lands, and then based on that brought a revenue. Then he was the one who again, who not, I won't say introduced, but who again rationalized income from the customs. He was one who earlier ships used to dock into the ports, then they will sell something, buy something, and go. But then Rajarajan introduced some kind of custom practices where there will be an officer assigned to a particular ship, and it was the duty of the officer. It's a job object of the officer to ensure that the guy sells his products and then buys other products, and then the tax was imposed on that. So he was the one who introduced this to rationalize the taxation system across various industries, across various formats, be it agriculture or be it trade. And because he required a lot of revenue, because he had a huge empire to rule, and a large army to feed, and so there was a large, we can say there was a large requirement for him to augment his revenues. So he introduced a lot of, you can say, their administrative reforms to generate additional revenue, and he also categorized, or can say, divided his empire into various units. Those units were already implemented in other kingdoms. You can see in Rashtrakutas, they already had the provinces and they had districts and all that stuff. But Rajarajan actually made it a very a robust local administration process where the smallest unit was called as Ur. Ur is, you can say, the modern day Panchayat. And the larger towns were called Taniyur, or you can say municipalities or corporations which we have today. Then this Ur, a cluster of, or I can say a group of villages or Ur, constituted what was called as Kutram, which is the modern day Taluk. A group of Kutrams or Taluks constituted Vadanadu. Vadanadu was something you can say a district. And a group of Vadanadu were constituted into a Mandalam, which is a province. And group of provinces formed, constituted the Chola Empire. And of this, the Vadanadu concept was introduced by Rajarajan for the first time. Before that, Vadanadu was not there. And even the other units were more, very loosely knit. There was no, you can say, proper coordination between these units earlier. It was Rajarajan who actually implemented this local administration setup and brought them, made them more robust. So what happened was, whatever happened at the central government, it did not have any adverse effect on these smaller towns because they were all self-sufficient. They were all having their own charter. They were having their own ways of generating revenues. They had their own taxation ways. So whatever happened in the center, whether it was Rajarajan was there, or Rajendran was there, or his sons were there, the emperor died, another took over, that did not have any negative impact on the lower units. The lower units were self-sufficient. They were robust. They generated their own revenue. They had to pay certain amount of tribute or revenue to the central government. Other than that, they can use the other whatever additional income they have generated for their own purpose. Rajarajan was the one who introduced this particular concept. There are about 9 mandalams when Rajarajan, 7 to 9 mandalams at any given point in time. There's 7 to 9 provinces that formed part of the Chola Empire, and it took it to even Sri Lanka. Even Sri Lanka was constituted as one province. And the most interesting thing is, he named all these provinces after his name. So naming bus stations and railway stations is nothing new. This happened even during Rajarajan's period.
Right.
So he, for example, the Rodambawadi or region surrounding Kolar district in Karnataka, Chittur and Anantapur districts of Andhra Pradesh were constituted as Nigarili Swara Mandalam. Then the Tondai Mandalam or the Pallava territory was named Jayangonda Swara Mandalam. Jayangonda Swaran was Rajarajan's title. So Sri Lanka was constituted as a Mumbudi Swara Mandalam. Mumbudi Swaran was Rajarajan's title. Mumbudi Swaran means the Chola king who wears 3 crowns. Chera Chola and the Pandya crowns. Mumbudi. Mudi means crown. So Mumbudi Swara Mandalam. And the Pandya territory was named as Tennat Pandya Rasaraja Swara Mandalam. So which means in every province he was omnipresent like God. So the inscriptions all carry this. I was in Avani in Karnataka in Kolar district. And actually the inscription I belong to later the Kulatunga's inscription. But refers to as Nigarili Swara Mandalam and Jayangonda Swara. So the king, so Rajarajan is your boss. So you may be a Pandya citizen, you may be a Gangapadi citizen, you may be a citizen of a Chera territory. That doesn't mean anything for Rajarajan. You are my citizen and I am your king. So he was omnipresent.
That is actually really nice. You have that a sense of belonging to one dynasty or one empire.
It's the other way also. So for the Pandyas, it's a constant reminder saying that you are now part of the Chola dynasty.
That is true.
You are no longer independent. You don't have a king. I am your boss. So it has, you can say, it's a two-edged weapon.
But that was the nature of battles, right? Like you go, you conquer, and you bring people under your rule. So yeah. So we spoke about administrative reforms. Can you tell us about the crimes and punishments also? Because I know they had like very unique punishments, which was more psychological also. Not just physical or mental, but it was very psychological. Is that correct?
See, it was like that. When the early punishments were more, psychological, where a person will be asked to light a perpetual lamp in a local temple for committing any offense, and his family members and his successors should also keep doing that. so that every time he comes to the temple to light a lamp, the people around him will be reminded of his crime, and he himself will be reminded of his crime. So it is more mental. So you go to a temple at 6 o'clock, you light a lamp, and people will definitely know that this guy is a criminal and he's lighting a lamp to serve a punishment. But as the empire grew, as the empire, when it transformed from a kingdom into an empire, the punishments also started becoming harsh. And there are a lot of, you can see inscriptions where there were whiplashes, where people were paraded on donkeys and around the village streets or the town streets. And the punishments also got more severe as days passed by, as the empire grew bigger and bigger. And so when people also started committing more and more crimes. So crimes were there, punishments were there. And the worst crime was Rajadroham, where you conspire against the royals. And that particular crime was, in fact, was mostly investigated, or the judgment was delivered by the king himself. Other than that, they had a local judiciary system. There are two set of judicial system where the central government, there will be, you can say, like what we have, the High Court and the Supreme Court. So they had local courts also, where punishments are given at a local level, and there are punishments which were given by the central or the Supreme Courts also, where the accused will be taken to the king's court or someone nominated by the king and given punishment. There are a large number of, in fact, inscriptions that talk about whiplashes also for not paying tax, and there are, but basically, two major punishments they gave was confiscating one's assets. So you are left, one fine morning you will be left on the road without any revenue. So you have to beg and take care of yourself. So the one thing is seizing the property, and the second thing is lighting the perpetual lamp. Both these were more to do with the mental state of the accused. So there were physical punishments and mental punishments. But as the empire grew, as the empire became bigger and bigger, there were harsh punishments that were meted to crimes.
But
and even there was one record of a person being hanged to death for a murder.
Okay,
and there are cases where a murder accused was let free just because the other party, the victim's family, did not want to press ahead with their charges. They has committed a crime, let him light a perpetual lamp and then do whatever he wants. We are no longer interested. So I think that could not be undone. That murder cannot be undone. So let God punish. So that kind of punishment.
So one of the interesting things that I noticed was in one of the inscriptions, it talks about the punishment meted out to the murderers of Aditya Karikalan, who was the crowned prince, and it was not of death or anything. Again, as you mentioned, they had just confiscated all of the properties, not just from the murderers, but their immediate family as well. Is that right? And they were chased out of the kingdom. Is that correct?
See, there is actually there's a healthy debate going on if a punishment was given in the first place.
Okay.
The particular inscription in the Udayarkudi temple, the Anandishwara temple, that talks about this particular incident, it is basically talks about a letter from the emperor. It starts like this: Viranarayanan Pedumkuri Makkalukku Chakravartigalin Tirumugam, which means it's a letter was sent from the Chakravarti, was Rajaraja.
Okay.
Now, whether there was a punishment given to the accused or not, we do not know. And Kodavail Balasubramanian sir, who is one of a leading historian, he has a very different take on that, and he sounds quite logical on that. As far as I am concerned, I don't think there was any punishment given as such, because the murder was a very high-profile murder. The murder happened in 969 when Aditya Karikalan was killed. At that time, his father Sundaraswaran was still alive, and Rajarajan was still not in the administration. The administration. And this particular inscription is dated the second year of Rajaraja, which is 986. Rajarajan came to power in 985, so his second year is 986. So why there was a gap of 17 years to punish the accused. The first thing is, my question is very simple. Four people have committed a very high-profile murder, and the particular inscription talks about four names: Ravidasan, Soman Samban, Parameswaran, and Revada Chakravarti. All these four are brothers. All these four guys are brothers.
Okay.
And all these four guys were holding a very important position in the Chola administration, because all their names end with Brahmadirajan. Brahmadirajan is the title given to very high officials in Chola administration. For example, Rajarajan's general was called Krishnan Raman Brahmadirajan. Rajendra's general, actually Rajendra's right-hand man, was Arayan Rajarajan Brahmadirajan. Brahmadirajan was the title that was given to a very high official in Chola administration who had access to the royals. So that's how these four people conspired to kill Aditya Karigalan. Now, Aditya Karigalan was killed in 1969. Do you think that these four guys would have stayed in Viranarayanapuram for another 16 years?
Probably
they would have definitely absconded after killing such a high-profile guy. They had just killed the crown prince, someone who is going to take over the empire, and Rajarajan's letter talking about confiscating the land is dated his second legal year, which is 17 years later. So I don't think it makes sense, or it makes sense for someone to stay in the same place. That too, when these guys were a very high-ranked official. A common man can just do that. He can just go into these guys and roam around in the empire. These guys were very high-level officials who had access to the royals. So I think in that way, I go with Kalki. Kalki says they actually escaped to Kollimalai. I don't know whether they escaped to Kollimalai or escaped to some other part, Charanad, other part.
They probably just absconded.
I don't think it would have stayed there for 17 years after committing such a high-profile murder. And also, that particular the Anantiswara temple inscription doesn't talk about any punishment being given. It says Aditya Karigalanai kontra drogigalana, and these four names, the lands of these people, those who have given their daughter or son to them or married into this family, so taken marriage from their family, and also their uncles, aunts, and gives a long list of people. We just confiscate all the lands and sell them at a market price, and pay that in treasury. This was just Rajarajan's letter. It clearly says Chakravarti in Tirumugam. And this particular inscription was set up by a person called Bharadan. This Bharadan was the one who bought the land of Revadasa Kramavittan as per the instructions given by the emperor. Chakravartigal has given this. He says that Aditya Karigalan, those who have murdered Aditya Karigalan, these four guys, you confiscate their land and sell them at a market price, and then deposit their money in the treasury. You put it in the treasury. And of that amount, you feed 15 Brahmins in that temple, give afternoon meals to 15 Brahmins in that temple on a daily basis, and you light a perpetual lamp. This is what the inscription is. So he says, as advised by the emperor's letter, I have purchased this land and I have done this.
That's very
interesting. It doesn't say anywhere if there was a court that was held, if these four people were tried and punishment was given. And in my opinion, I go with Kodavayal sir. I don't think they would have remained there for 16 years after committing suicide.
Right.
That particular, and also the letter clearly says that where the lands were. There's some Tirkukudi Irupu of Viranarayanapuram. Which means that it was the inscription was put there just because the lands confiscated were part of that particular village.
Right. Probably they absconded, and later their lands. But I mean, it could be anything. But that's a very interesting story for sure. Great. So, one last question about the role of women in the Chola kingdom. Again, we hear about Rajarajan's sister being a pretty big influence in his life, and we hear about a lot of queens. So, what was the role? How were they treated? Did they participate in the administrative affairs? Can you tell us something about that?
See, we do not have any direct records of the royal family women taking part in the administration. But actually, in those days, the royal, every person in the royal family, be it a male or a female, they had their own assets and they are free to do whatever they want with that assets. For example, if you take Kundabai, Rajarajan's sister, as you said, who had a lot of influence on Rajarajan's life and who basically brought up Rajendra also. She There was an inscription of Kundabai that talks about a medical camp, or you can say Padrasale, she says, or a hospital being set up from her own funds in the Tanjavur temple premises. So probably they had a say in the administration to the extent that, to the extent of giving grants to various development activities, even though that probably did not happen through the king or administration. They have their own lands. They have given lands to temples. In fact, Kundavai, there is another record that states that Kundavai had given land, the revenue from a land to a particular temple. So giving revenue to the temple is still an administrative part. But instead of taking the administrative route, she probably took the other route of doing it personally. As far as records are concerned, there were female officers in Chola ranks. But how many of them were there and what were the roles they were performing, we do not know. They were called as Adhigarichi. So Adhigari is Adhigarichi. So there were women, you can say employees or officers, probably in high positions also, though we do not have any direct record of what they were doing. For example, if you look at the Chalukya inscription, there are 2 or 3 inscriptions that clearly state that Akka Devi, sister of Someshwara I, was a governor of one province. She was governing over the Vanavasi province. And she has her own inscriptions that talk about her reign and where she has given grants from her as an official, officially as a governor of that province. But I have not come across any such Chola records. And when it comes to ladies, in my opinion, it was Kulothunga was the first to mention his wife's name in his inscriptions. He used to say that he used to give his wife's name, and then said queen's name, then Vitaruliya Kulothunga. So he was the one who introduced his wife's name in his inscriptions. But definitely there were women officials in the hierarchy, but we do not know. I don't come across any women officials in the military hierarchy. I have not come. Probably in the, I can say, the non-military hierarchy, there were officials. There were doctors. There were Maruthuvachi, they used to call. So there were doctors. There were all kinds of professionals. But we do not have exact records of how many were there and what exactly were doing and where were they posted and all those stuff. But the queens, the royals, they had their own, as I said, rights to give grants, be it a man or a female.
Okay, and if I remember it right, when they attended very, very big events, their names were also recorded, right? Like, for example, when the Tanjavur temple was built, the queens of Rajarajan who attended the opening ceremony, the Kumbhabhishekam, is inscribed. Is that right?
In fact, it is there. And in fact, even there, Rajarajan has given a special place to his sister. Inside, actually, in the Rajarajan's and Kundavai's participation is put together at a separate place, while he lists the other members of the family in a different place. So it is inside the temple. He has put his sister's name along with him, and even in these inscriptions, he separately mentions his sister's name.
Okay.
Even for the donations to the big temple, he says, "Yam koduttana, yam akkan koduttana." It is my sister, whatever my sister has given. Then yam pendir koduttana, whatever my family members, my wives have given. So there he has just differentiated his sister from the other female members of his family. Yam koduttanavum, yam akkan koduttanavum, yam pendir koduttanavum. So whatever I had given, whatever my sister has given, then my wives and family members have given.
Oh, wow.
So probably he had a lot of respect for his sisters, and according to scholars, he even his sister used to attend the courts, Rajarajan's court, and she had a separate seat. Even he never used to bring his wife to the court, but Kundavi used to attend the court proceedings, and she even had a separate seat in the court next to his brother, younger brother.
Wow.
So she had a lot of influence on Rajarajan.
That's brilliant. I know we've spoken so much, and there is still so much more to talk in terms of art and architecture, the amazing temples that the Cholas have built and left us as beautiful gifts, including the Tanjavur temple and the Gangaikota Chorapuram. So, we have very limited time. Hopefully, we will be able to talk about all of that in the next show. But thank you so much for coming over and talking and telling us so many stories that we will carry with us forever. And for those kids who are interested, I would strongly suggest that you go watch even this old Tamil movie called Rajaraja Choran, acted in by Shivaji Ganeshan. It's a very beautiful movie. It's one of my favorite movies as well. You might even be able to visualize or see some of the things that we just discussed being portrayed in that movie very, very beautifully. So thank you so much, Ramesh.
Thank you, Sarandya.
Meet again in another show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.